Okay, so yeah, today we're talking about middleware. So the objectives, we're going to cover the what, why, and how of middleware, the different types of express middleware, how to create custom middleware, and some error handling middleware. At the end of the module, you should be able to explain what it is, write custom middleware, and write error handling middleware. So let's talk a little bit about what middleware is. We can use Express middleware to add features to Express. It's the biggest part of Express, and most of the code we write, including route handlers, so everything we learned yesterday, is middleware under the hood. And there's three different types. There's built-in, there's third-party, and there's custom. So built-in middleware is included with Express, but not added to the application automatically. So you saw that example with server.use express.json. Now we can use third-party middleware. Some popular ones are Morgan, Cores, and Helmet. And we'll go over Helmet and Morgan today. And then custom middleware are functions that we can write to perform certain tasks. So let's open up VS Code. And we'll actually just be working off of server.js today. It'll be pretty simple. If we look inside of our hubs router, all the endpoints are created. We're just going to focus on creating that middleware today. All right. First thing we need to do is just yarn, install the dependencies. And let's run yarn server and open up Postman. So from the start, let's just get the localhost 4000. Let's just get the root. And so we have Lambda Hubs API. Welcome to the Lambda Hubs API. Now, if we click on headers, we see we have 6. The biggest problem right here is this one, X powered by Express. That is a huge security problem. Rosa, can you think of why it could be a security problem?
Is it global? Is that why? I don't know.
So the biggest problem is, say you have like a hacker, and the hacker sees what stack you're working in. So the hacker knows, oh, well, they're writing everything in Express. It's going to be a lot more simple for them to hack into our app.
Because they can't identify which language.
Yeah, they're like, oh, they're in Express. I'm an expert in hacking Express. This is going to be easy. You never want anyone to know what stack you're working in. Which brings us to our first middleware. So open up VS Code. And the first thing we're going to need is Helmet. So right under the const express, we can say const helmet equals require helmet. And then once again, this is the import in Node. You want to make a const and require. It's the same as import helmet from helmet. And let's stop our server real fast. And yarn add helmet. All right. Now underneath the server.use express.json, say server.use helmet. And let's restart our server. Bring up Postman. get that again. And now we have 11 headers, but as you can see, that express is off.
Mm-hmm.
So nothing here tells us that we're in express.
Mm-hmm.
So essentially what this does is it blocks the users or anyone we don't want knowing what stack we're working with. All right, now let's talk about Morgan. So underneath helmet, say const Morgan equals require Morgan. And let's stop the server again. Yarn add Morgan. Okay, before we use Morgan, let's go see what Morgan is. So Morgan is the logging middleware for Node.js apps. So Rosa, do you remember Logger for Redux?
Yeah.
And what did Logger do?
It would like show us like log the it's like a log for the backend, show us some errors.
Yeah, it would tell us our previous state, our next state, and our current state. It just logs it in the terminal and lets you know what state you're in. What Morgan does for Node is it logs every time you try to send a request to an endpoint. And so we have regular Morgan, Morgan short, tiny, dev, all these. So default is the standard, short is shorter than default, tiny is the minimal, and then dev is concise output colored by response status for development use. We use dev. It's just more, you get more information back from that logger. So let's say server.use. We'll call Morgan. And then we just want to call the dev. Let's restart our server. Bring up Postman, and let's get the hubs. All right, it's going to be API/hubs. You can see in the body we have all these hubs here. If we go back to VS Code, now we have get API/hubs. It gave us a status code 200. So what dev does is it color codes it to the status codes.
Mm-hmm.
So I think green is success, yellow is like invalid credentials or something the user did, and then red is something's wrong with the code. And then it tells you how many milliseconds it took. And to be honest, I'm not sure what the 470 means. But essentially, it's just Morgan's just a logger inside of your terminal. Tells you every single time you make one of those requests.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so server.use express.json. That's built-in middleware. Helmet and Morgan are both third-party middlewares. And that's why if we go in our package.json, in our dependencies, we see Helmet and we see Morgan.
Mm-hmm.
You actually have to install those.
Mm-hmm.
So now we can talk about custom middleware and how to write it. So you can leave your server running now. We shouldn't need to close the server for any reason. And let's write our first piece of middleware, or custom middleware. Let's say server.use. Take in a request and a response. The response dot status will send a 404. Say dot send. And we'll say ain't nobody got time for that. Give it some space.
What was the install for Morgan?
That would be yarn add Morgan. Now, if we go to Postman with this custom middleware, we have the server.use request and response. Response.status is going to send a 404 not found. And the message will be, ain't nobody got time for that. We're going to get the hubs. And you see it sends a 404. And ain't nobody got time for that. Now, the reason it does this, we can do like hubs 2. Ain't nobody got time for that. We can do 2 messages. Same thing. And the reason it's popping up for every endpoint is because we're using this middleware globally. So you can use middleware globally and you can use it locally. When you use it globally, so every single endpoint we have will send this status. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I remember watching the videos on that.
Yeah, but something like this, the middleware that blocks all requests with a 404 is not useful to us at all.
404 again is not found, is that correct?
Yeah, so 404 is not found, and you can actually do like a 500.
Oh, okay.
And send it, and that'll be a 500. A 404 just always means not found. So you can choose what error to send it. But the biggest problem now is this is not useful to us in any sort of way. We don't want to block every single request.
Mm-hmm.
So let's comment this out. We don't need this. This is just a small example to show how we can globally add middleware and have it affect every single endpoint that we have right now.
Mm-hmm.
But let's write a piece of middleware that adds information to the request object. So on this server.get, that's just going to be that root of the URL, takes in a request, a response, and then a next. And we'll talk about next probably in a few minutes. Let's change this. Let's do welcome. You can say request.team to Lambda Hub's API. So now if we go to just a slash after localhost 4000, take away this, we get welcome undefined to the Lambda Hub's API. The reason it's undefined is they don't know what this request.team is. So give ourselves some space and let's define this. This will be a function and we'll call it team namer. Team namer is going to take in the request, a response, and next. Request.team will set to Lambda students. And the last thing we need to do is add next. So if we don't call next, the request will hang and clients will time out. And so calling next continues to the next middleware or root handler. So let me quickly write this out. Continues to the next middleware slash. So inside of our custom middleware, we're going to need next, and next just passes it along. All right, can you tell me, can we just run Postman just like this? Or do we need to do something else?
You need to make an endpoint for it.
Well, we'll have the endpoint. The endpoint's right here. So server.get, we're doing the slash, so the root, and then we're saying welcome request.team. Down here, we know the request.team is Lambda students, but if you see this team namer is kind of grayed out.
Oh, yeah.
We have to come up here and we have to say server.use and call that team namer. So remember, with any function you create, any middleware, you have to use it. You have to tell the server to use it.
Okay.
Now it's not grayed out. And let's go back to Postman. And remember, this is undefined. We try it again. Now we have welcome Lambda students to the Lambda Hub's API. So this is our second custom middleware that we created. This one's much more useful than just blocking all requests. So this value right here is set by the middleware down here, request.team. So we can say team is wib17 homies. Go back to Postman, get it, and now it's wib17 homies. Does this make sense so far?
Yes.
All right. So what time is it? 10:22. Let's do a quick 5-minute break.
Okay.
And then when we come back, we'll write another custom middleware piece. Five-minute timer. All right. Okay. So now let's write another piece of middleware, and it's going to return the status code 403 and the message you shall not pass when the seconds on the clock are multiples of 3, and then we'll call next for all other times. So let's make it before the or after the team namer. Write function, and we'll call this a Moody gatekeeper. It's going to be Moody on when we can see our functions or our endpoints. This will take in a request, a response, and then next. Let's make a const called seconds. That's going to be new gate dot get seconds. And then it's if the seconds on the clock are multiples of 3. We'll say if seconds equals 0, response dot status, that's a 403. Response.status 403 dot JSON. Want to parse it to JSON. Say you shall not pass. Then we want our else, and we'll just call next. So if it's not multiples of 3, we want to just next, go on to the next middleware route. And underneath the server.use team namer, so server.use Moody gatekeeper. Server's running. And let's see if this works. It might take a few tries. So let's try and get the hubs. It'll be API/hubs. Ah, got it. So you, and then shall not pass. Try it again. We got it. Got it. Got it. Got it. Shall not pass. Do it a few more times. So yeah, now we have our Moody gatekeeper. This one's pretty cool, but not useful at all either. So once again, all we've been doing is adding our middleware globally. Let's talk about adding middleware locally. What if we don't want to affect every single endpoint we have? What if we just want maybe 1 or 2 to be affected?
User auth.
Yeah, so let's create it locally. And one of the best ways for local middleware is authentication. So let's double check. So yeah, we're working off hubs. That works. Let's go in here. Let's comment out the server.use Moody gatekeeper. That's just going to be annoying when we're working on the other middlewares. And let's create a function called restricted. And restricted will take in a request, a response, and next. Const password equals request dot headers, and we'll talk about headers dot password. We can say if password equals, let's do taco. If password equals taco, next. We want to pass it along. Else, response dot status 401 dot JSON, and let's give it a message. The invalid credentials. Now this is how we can use it locally. If we go up here and let's find, just give ourselves some space here. So we have our server.use API /hubs hubs router. What we can do is we can just call restricted on here. Restricted. And now that's going to restrict and use that custom middleware we created to anything with the end API /hubs. Let's check the server is running. Go into Postman, and let's first just try and get the root. So this works. We didn't restrict this. If we go to API /hubs, we have a message that says invalid credentials. We can try as much as we want, but we have that 401, which is unauthorized. And let's talk about 401. So similar to 403 forbidden, but specifically for use when authentication is possible but has failed or not yet been provided. So if we go back to our code, you can see our password is request.headers.password. And the cool thing about Postman is we can go into our headers here. We have our content type, which is JSON. In here, our key will be password, and our value will be taco. And now we should be able to get the hubs. There we go. So we can uncheck it, invalid credentials, check it again, taco. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Wait, but in this one you didn't use AU like in the demo?
No, so what we will do is we'll talk about authorization. Authorization is a lot better than password.
That's next or something.
Yeah, so we'll talk about authorization, and we'll fix this restricted to make sure it's authorization and not just password. And Rosa, can you see me scrolling on my screen?
Yes.
Okay, that was weird. It keeps saying my screen sharing is paused.
Oh, that happened before, didn't it?
Yeah, let me. Let me try this again. Okay,
Okay. Yeah, I see it.
perfect. So let's do this. Okay. So before we talk about authorization, let's create one more custom middleware. And what we want this one to do is it should accept a name as the only argument. And let's name it Frodo. So if the name's not Frodo, we won't be able to access any of those endpoints. If the name is Frodo, we'll have access. So this one will be function. We'll say only, because it'll be only the name. So only name. And let's say returns the middleware. We want to return the middleware. So return function takes in a request, a response, and next. Const person name equals the request dot headers dot name. And we'll leave this as an empty string for now. And we'll say, just in case there is no name header provided. And let's say this function can use the parameter passed to the wrapper function. Let me write that. Parameter. Okay. So if personal bar, we don't want that. Person name dot say two lowercase equals name dot two lowercase. We want to call next. We want to just hit on to the next one. So if we have that name in there, move on. Else, the response dot status. This will also be a 401 dot JSON. Give it a message. That message will be you have no access to this resource. And remember, this message can be anything you want. Okay, what do we need to do before we can test it?
You need to not call it, but use it.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's like, what do you call it? Grayed out.
Since it's grayed out, it means we're not using it at all.
Yeah.
So if we go into, where are we? Well, we keep going up. Right here. So we don't want to use it globally. Let's use it locally. And after this restricted on server.use/API/hubs, we'll call only. And that name, we said we wanted it to be Frodo. So now it's not grayed out, and we're saying only access this if the name is Frodo. Let's go into Postman. So we have the password. Password is taco. Let's give it a name. Or first, let's try without the name. So our message, you have no access to this resource. That name is Frodo. We'll send it. Now we can get the hubs.
Mm-hmm.
And it will work. So hubs 2/messages. Get those. We have all these messages. We take away the name. We have no access. If we take away the password, add the name, invalid credentials. What happens if we, I think it'll just be invalid credentials if we don't have either. Yeah. And now we have the password and name, and now we can see it. So that one's pretty cool just because now we know only if the name's Frodo in there, we can access it. So that's cool for, like, I guess, admin. If you're building like a web app and you want an admin page on those endpoints, you can do restricted, and you can do only if username is the big boss.
Yeah.
So remember, we can use more than one local middleware. So we're using the restricted, we're using the only. We can add another one if we have it. It can take multiple local middlewares. All right, let's talk about error handling. We can write a custom middleware to handle all errors. And with error handling, you want that to be at the very bottom. This one will be called error handler. And an error, a request, a response, and next. Say, here you could inspect the error and decide how to respond. So let's decide how to respond. Response dot status. This will be a 400 dot JSON. And our message to be no, 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 no. No. No exclamation points. And then we just want to pass in the error. Right. Let's use it. So right here, say server.use. That was error handler. Let's see if we can get this error handler to work. Send that. Don't have a password. Invalid credentials. Don't have a name. You know what? Actually, let's fix our authorization, and then we can get it to work.
Why does the Moody Gatekeeper looks like it's grayed out? But
So I commented out the Moody Gatekeeper.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, it was going to be really annoying if we hit the multiples of 3 and it kept giving us that error.
Oh, yeah.
So I just commented that out. We can comment this one out too. Let me spell this one correctly. All right, let's change. Where's our restricted? Right here. So we have our const password equals request.headers.password. Let's change the password to authorization. Then we have our response.status, invalid credentials. Let's do one more else. Say next. Oops. And give it a message. No authorization header provided. Let me double check. I messed something up here. Else, that looks good. That looks good. That looks good.
Try else if. Oh, that fixed it.
Yeah, so now we have if our console's a password equals request.headers.authorization. If request.headers and request.headers.authorization, if password equals, let's change this back to taco. Next, else we want to send a 401 invalid credentials, else our message no authorization header provided. Okay, let's go in here, take away this. You know what? We can actually keep this photo on here. So let's go to the hubs, send. Now we have our message, no, 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 no. And then our error message, no authorization header provided. Let's do a new one called authorization. That's going to be taco. Let's try it with taco with 2 O's, see what happens. It gives us invalid credentials. Taco with 1 O. Now we can get everything. Take off the name. We don't have access to this resource because there's no name. And once again, if we take away the authorization, we get our message from that error handler. Then we have the error, and the message that comes with that error is no authorization header provided. Let me do this. So let's quickly talk about the different types of middleware. We have built-in middleware, server.use express.json. Then we have third-party middleware. So we have the Helmet and we have Morgan. So Helmet blocks Postman and the web from showing what stack we're using. We don't want people to know we're in. They can know we're in Node. That's pretty common. Like everyone, you can tell when someone's in React when you inspect it in the React Dev tools. But we don't want any of those hackers knowing we're using Express. So we can use Helmet for that. We use Morgan as a third party to get this loggers right here. So if you see, we have the yellow. Green means it went through. Yellow means either we don't have an authorization, we don't have the password. If we're trying to post something, we don't have the right keys in that post. Red will be if we messed up in our code. Now we have custom middleware. The first custom middleware we wrote was this: server.use request response, response.status 500.send. Ain't nobody got time for that. We use that globally, so no matter what endpoint we try and get, we're going to get this status code and this message. So that's the first piece of global middleware we wrote. We don't want that.
But did the instructor put it in the bottom, I think, so that it wouldn't be so global or something in the training videos?
So you can put this at the bottom, but to make it local, you go right here.
Oh, okay.
So now we're saying only on the API/hubs, we're going to make it restricted. And that restricted is this function we created. And then we have the only function, which we created right down here.
Mm-hmm.
And only if the name is Frodo, you're allowed into this part.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And then, of course, we have our hubs router, which we created Monday. So this one's locally. This Moody Gatekeeper is globally. We're just calling it right up here. We're just using it across a global scale. And now we have our local restricted. And we have our local only name. Now we could, let's try this. So our function restricted, let's go in here. Let's just try saying restricted, see what happens. So on our server.get, we're just getting the root of the URL. We're calling restricted. And let's see if it works. So let's now give it a name, an authorization. And let's try it. So it works. So let's give it the authorization. And now we can go inside of it.
Okay. Where did you put that changes?
So all I did was put the restricted right in our server.get to right there, the home.
Mm-hmm.
And I just threw in restricted.
Okay, I get it.
So this team namer, remember we used right up here. So this is our first piece of custom middleware. Our request.team is web17 homies. So we threw in that request.team here. And if we take away the restricted again, we can go inside Postman. We can take away authorization, send it, and everything works fine.
Yeah.
So that is middleware. So let's quickly go back. So at the end of this module, you should be able to explain what middleware is and the different types. And you should know what middleware is from Redux.
Yeah.
Different types of middleware are just those three types: built-in, third-party, custom. You should be able to write custom middleware. We wrote probably 3 or 4 instances of custom, and then our write error handling middleware. So our write error handling middleware is down here. You want it at the bottom. And so if there's any error on the request, the response, next, we're going to send that status 400 and that message no. And then it will send this one as well. So let's quickly go look at that one more time. Let's get API/hubs. Let's get it. And now we have that custom middleware we wrote. And then we have the middleware inside of that function. So it's just nested inside of this.